Hey, you. Yeah, I'm talking to you. You ever wonder what happens when you mess with the wrong person? Stick around because what you're about to see will leave your jaw on the floor. Like, share, and subscribe if you love stories where karma strikes back harder than a thunderstorm. The hallway was crowded, just like it always was after lunch, a sea of students rushing to get to their next classes, chattering, laughing, and shoving past each other in a barely controlled chaos. In the middle of it all, Jake Thompson stood with his usual cocky smirk, scanning the crowd like a predator looking for prey. Jake wasn't just any high school senior, he was the bully. The kind that walked the halls like he owned them. The kind that didn't care who he hurt as long as he got a laugh out of it. And today he was feeling especially cruel. That's when he saw her. A small, frail-looking woman standing near the lockers holding a stack of books too big for her tiny frame. She was dressed simply, a cardigan buttoned up to her neck, her silver hair pulled back neatly. She looked like she didn't belong there, like she had stepped straight out of another time. Jake nudged his friend, Brandon. Dude, check it out. What's Grandma doing here? Lost on her way to the knitting club. Brandon snorted, but Jake wasn't done yet. His grin widened as an idea took root in his mind. Watch this. With a deliberate stride, he walked up to her and, with one swift motion, shoved her shoulder just enough to knock her off balance. The books tumbled to the floor, pages fluttering like wounded birds. The old woman stumbled but didn't fall. Instead, she straightened herself with quiet dignity, her sharp eyes locking onto Jake's. Gasps rippled through the hallway. Students turned, their curiosity piqued. Some pulled out their phones, sensing that something interesting was about to go down. But Jake? Jake just laughed. Oops. My bad. Need some help, Granny? He bent down, pretending to pick up a book before tossing it a few feet away. More laughter from the onlookers. The woman said nothing. Not at first. She simply looked at Jake with an expression that sent a strange chill down his spine. Not fear. Not anger. Just knowing. Then, in a voice that was quiet but carried through the hallway like a judge's verdict, she spoke. You have no idea who I am, do you? Jake scoffed, folding his arms. Should I? The woman tilted her head slightly, her eyes never leaving his. Perhaps you should. Because in about 10 seconds, you're going to wish you had. Jake's laughter died in his throat. Something about the way she said it, calm, certain, made his stomach twist. Then, before he could blink, the principal's voice boomed through the hallway. Jake Thompson. My office. Now. The crowd erupted. Jake froze, his face draining of color as he turned toward the voice. And that's when it hit him. Because standing just a few feet away, glaring at him with the kind of fury that could break mountains, was none other than Principal Carter. And she was looking straight at the old woman with something Jake had never seen before. Respect. Reverence. And maybe, just maybe, a little bit of fear. The hallway buzzed with whispers as Principal Carter stormed toward Jake, her sharp heels clicking against the tiled floor like a judge's gavel striking down a sentence. Students parted like the Red Sea, eyes darting between Jake and the old woman who remained as still as a statue. Jake's heart pounded. He had been in trouble before, detention, warnings, even a suspension, but this felt different. Principal Carter wasn't just angry. She was furious. Inside. Now. Her voice was tight with barely restrained rage as she pointed toward her office. Jake swallowed hard. He glanced back at the old woman, expecting to see smug satisfaction on her face. But she wasn't gloating. She was just watching him, her gaze steady, unreadable. That somehow made it worse. The crowd was eating it up. Phones were out, whispering voices narrating the scene like commentators on a championship game. Jake clenched his fists and pushed through the crowd, his face burning as he followed Principal Carter. The moment they entered the office, she slammed the door shut. What is wrong with you, Jake? Her voice wasn't just angry, it was disappointed. Jake shifted uncomfortably. He was used to anger. Disappointment? That was something else. It was just a joke, he muttered. A joke? Principal Carter scoffed, running a hand through her hair. Do you have any idea who that woman is? Jake rolled his eyes, trying to play it cool despite the storm brewing in his gut. What is she, like, your mom or something? The silence that followed was deafening. Then Principal Carter leaned forward, placing both hands on the desk. That woman, she said, her voice deadly quiet, is Eleanor Grayson. Jake blinked. Okay, and? Principal Carter's expression darkened. And she's the reason you have a school to even walk into. Jake frowned. What? She was the principal here for 20 years before I was, Carter continued. She built this place up from nothing. She turned it into one of the best schools in the district. And before that, she let out a breath, shaking her head. She was a teacher who dedicated her entire life to making sure kids like you had a future. Something cold crept down Jake's spine. Wait, you mean sheesh? Yes. Carter's eyes locked onto his. She ran this school before you were even born. And not just that. She survived things you can't even imagine. Jake felt a lump in his throat, but he pushed it down. So what? That doesn't mean Carter's voice cut through his protest like a knife. That woman you just shoved? She leaned in closer. She was once the youngest professor in the state. She fought to keep kids out of gangs, saved students from lives they never thought they could escape. She has more honors and awards than I can count. And you? You just humiliated her in front of the entire school. Jake's stomach twisted. The room suddenly felt too small. He had shoved her like she was nothing. Mocked her. And now? He wasn't facing just any teacher. He had just disrespected a legend. A knock at the door made both of them turn. Then the door swung open, and Eleanor Grayson walked in. Jake felt the air shift the moment Eleanor Grayson stepped inside. She moved with an effortless grace, her posture straight, her expression calm, but her presence was heavy, filling the room in a way that made Jake's chest tighten. Principal Carter straightened immediately, her anger momentarily replaced by something closer to respect. Mrs. Grayson, she said, her voice measured. Ayo. Eleanor raised a hand, silencing her. Then she turned her gaze on Jake. Up close, her eyes weren't just sharp, they were piercing. Jake had faced down angry teachers, furious parents, even cops when his pranks got out of hand. But this was different. She wasn't yelling. She wasn't scolding. She was studying him. Jake shifted in his seat, suddenly feeling exposed. Look, you remind me of someone, Eleanor said, cutting him off. Jake blinked. That was not what he expected. What? She took a slow step forward, then another. A boy. Years ago. He was just like you. Cocky. Reckless. Thought the world owed him something. Jake swallowed but said nothing. Eleanor smiled, but it wasn't warm. That boy used to pick on kids smaller than him. Used to think respect was something he could take rather than earn. Jake glanced at Principal Carter, expecting her to jump in, but she remained silent, watching the exchange with a strange intensity. Eleanor continued. Do you know what happened to that boy? Jake shook his head. He ended up in prison. Her voice was soft, but the weight of her words crashed down like a hammer. He thought he was untouchable until he wasn't. And when the consequences finally caught up to him, he realized too late that he had wasted every opportunity given to him. Jake's throat felt dry. What does that have to do with me? Eleanor tilted her head. Tell me, Jake, why do you do it? Do what? Push people down? Humiliate them? Why? Jake bristled. I don't. Eleanor's gaze sharpened. Don't lie to me, young man. He hesitated. No one had ever asked him that before. Teachers yelled, parents punished, but no one ever really asked. I don't know, he muttered. It's just fun, I guess. Eleanor let out a soft chuckle. Fun. She nodded as if rolling the word around in her mind. Hurting others is fun to you. Jake didn't respond. Eleanor sighed. I knew boys like you when I was a teacher. And do you know what I did with them? Jake clenched his jaw. What? Send them to detention? Give them a lecture? She smiled again, and this time, there was something almost mischievous in her eyes. No, I gave them a choice. Jake frowned. A choice? Eleanor nodded. Right now you have two paths, Jake. One, you can continue as you are. Keep pretending you're untouchable. Keep pushing people down. And one day, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but one day you will push the wrong person. The room was deathly silent. Or, she continued, you can take the other path. The one where you prove that you're more than this. More than just another bully who peaked in high school. Jake felt something twist in his chest. He wasn't sure if it was anger, shame, or something else entirely. And how exactly am I supposed to do that? He asked, forcing a scoff. Eleanor stepped even closer, looking him dead in the eye. You're going to prove it, she said. And I'm going to make sure of it. Jake's pulse quickened. What does that mean? It means, Eleanor said, starting tomorrow, you'll be spending every day after school with me. Jake's eyes widened. What? Doing what? Her smile didn't waver. Learning. Learning what? Eleanor turned to Principal Carter. He's mine for the next 2 weeks. Carter gave a small nod. Agreed. Jake shot up from his chair. Wait. I didn't. Eleanor raised an eyebrow. I told you, Jake. You have a choice. Her voice dropped slightly, carrying an almost eerie certainty. But choose wisely, because once you pick a path, There's no turning back. The next few days felt different. Jake wasn't sure when the shift happened, but something inside him was unsettled. The words in that journal haunted him. No one cares about me, so why should I care about them? He couldn't stop thinking about it. About the kid who never came back. About the way Eleanor had looked at him, not with anger, but with understanding. By the end of the week, he found himself standing outside the library again. But this time, he wasn't dragging his feet. When he stepped inside, Eleanor was already waiting, as if she knew he'd show up. "You're early," she noted. Jake shrugged. "Guess I figured we should get this over with." She smiled knowingly but didn't press him. Instead, she slid another book across the table. This time, it wasn't a journal. It was a thick, worn-out yearbook. Jake hesitated before flipping through it. The pictures were old, the pages yellowing at the edges. He skimmed past the smiling faces until something made him stop. It was a picture of a boy. Sharp jaw, confident smirk, a glint of mischief in his eyes. Jake frowned. "Who's this?" Eleanor leaned forward. "That," she said, "is the boy I told you about." Jake's stomach dropped. "No way." He shook his head. "This guy, he doesn't look like someone who took his own life?" Eleanor finished for him. "That's the thing, Jake. Pain doesn't always look the way you expect it to." Jake felt his throat tighten. Eleanor tapped the photo. He was popular, smart, could make a whole room laugh. Her voice softened, but no one ever saw the battles he was fighting inside. Jake exhaled slowly. "So why are you telling me this?" Eleanor met his gaze. "Because I see something in you, Jake. You could go down that same road. Maybe not his exact path, but one just as destructive." Jake stiffened. "I'm not it. You push people away before they can push you first," she said, cutting him off. "You act like nothing touches you, but I know that's not true." Jake clenched his jaw, looking away. He hated how she could read him so easily. Eleanor continued. "You still have a choice. You can keep being the kid who shoves people down, or you can be the person who lifts them up." Jake scoffed, but it lacked his usual confidence. "And what? Suddenly start being nice to everyone?" Eleanor chuckled. "No one's asking you to be a saint. But think about this, how do you want to be remembered?" Jake hesitated. "How do you want to be remembered?" He thought of that journal. The words scrawled in anger and sadness. He thought of all the kids he'd pushed around, laughed at, made feel like nothing. Was that really the legacy he wanted? Eleanor stood up, smoothing out her sweater. "This was never about punishment, Jake. It was about showing you that you have the power to change." Jake swallowed hard. The weight of her words settled in his chest. For the first time in his life, he wasn't sure who he wanted to be. But maybe, just maybe, it was time to figure it out.